Welcome to the Counselling Tutor Podcast, the must-listen-to podcast for students of counselling and psychotherapy. Here are your hosts, Rory Lees-Oakes and Ken Kelly.
Hello and welcome to episode 44 of the Counselling Tutor Podcast with me, Rory Lees-Oakes. And with me, as always, across the studio screen is my partner in Crimes Against Counselling, Mr. Ken Kelly. How you doing, Ken?
Hello, it's good to be here. I like that, Crimes Against Counselling. I'm in a particularly good mood, Rory, because I have in my hand the official hard copy of my book that was authored recently, Basic Counselling Skills, A Student's Guide. And it was great. You know, we had the early release and we put that out to our counselling tutor members, and it was really well received. And I was so happy about that. But there's just something about holding a book in your hand, smelling it. Listen to that. Oh, hey, quality of it.
I can smell it.
Smelling it. And I don't know what it is. It just comes alive when you hold it in your hand. So I'm in a place of happiness, I guess.
Indeed, and there's something to be said about. I said in the intro, Crimes Against Counselling. Of course, that's a bit of a backhanded joke, but there's something about releasing something, isn't there? Releasing a book, and there you go. It's released, and I've read the copy of it, the draft of it, and it's fantastic. It really is Ken's raison d'etre in counselling. It's what he's brilliant at. He's brilliant at a lot of things, but skills was always one of your very, very big passions, wasn't it, Ken?
Indeed it is. Indeed it is. And I recognised, as did you, Rory, when we were teaching together as counselling tutors, that very often someone that is studying counselling doesn't follow the traditional academic route of going from school into college and then going into university to study counselling, that there's sometimes a kind of an arc that you'll go out and live some life first before coming back. Then to be faced with thick academic language can be challenging for some. So the idea was to make an accessible counselling skills book that kind of speaks in plain English and gives audio examples so you can actually hear what the skills are doing, how they work in the counselling session, evaluate them together. And as I say, I mean, the feedback has been amazing. We sold over 500 copies in the first 10 days of it going live. And if anyone's listening to this and you're studying counselling and you want to have a counselling skills handbook, you can get that on Amazon. Just go to Amazon and put in the full title of Basic Counselling Skills, A Student Guide, and it'll be there, and you can buy it.
Yeah, and if you go to the show notes for this podcast on www.counsellingtutor.com, remember there's two L's in counselling. We spell it the English, British, UK way. If you go to episode 44, there's a link in the webpage. You can click on it, and that will take you through where you can make your purchase and see the great reviews. There's been some really great reviews on the Facebook page already from those people who have purchased the e-book, hasn't there, Ken?
There has indeed. And so today's about bringing value to you. We've got a great episode 44. I like how that rolls off the tongue there. 44 almost rhymes. And we're starting off, we're going to be speaking about how to get into a client's frame of reference. We'll get there in a moment. And that came from our Facebook page. It's somebody that brought that topic up. Then we'll be going into theory with Rory, and an interesting one today as we're looking at existential counselling. And Rory's going to kind of give us a bit of a background and an overview of that. So what can we kind of expect from that? A small taster, Rory.
Well, I'm going to quote Rollo, who is probably the leader was the leader in existential counselling in America. He certainly wrote the first book on existentialism in American literature. And I quote him, he says, "Human life begins on the far side of despair." And we're going to look at existentialism, existential therapy, and look at what that really means. And I'm going to be taking you through Rollo and also a little bit about Viktor Frankl, two leading theorists in existential therapy. So if you're doing a compare and contrast, or maybe you're studying it as a primary theory, I think you're going to find this really, really helpful. Really helpful.
Excellent. Looking forward to that one. And then we're going to be ending today with a bit of a debate, and we're going to be speaking about the 7th stage of process as outlined by Carl Rogers. And this again is a topic that came up in our Facebook page where a contributor was asking, can somebody really reach that 7th stage of process? So we're going to be examining that and kicking it around a little bit here today. But right back to the beginning, starting off with frame of reference. And you have a question there, Rory, that came on that prompted this topic. Are you able to share a bit of that with us?
I am, Ken. And first of all, we'd like to just thank everybody who contributes to our Facebook page. If you don't know about our Facebook page, if you just type Counselling Tutor into Facebook, you'll find that there's a closed group. If you knock on the door, we'll let you in. Over 7,000 like-minded people in the group, and they bring up and ask questions, and we choose questions from that group to share. And we thank Louise Christine Wild, and she says, are there any techniques, questions and skills that we can implement in order to get into the client's frame of reference quicker? So it's an interesting one, isn't it?
Isn't it just?
Yeah. and I'm going to kick off, Ken. You're going to have your own thoughts on this, but I think the biggest skill right at the beginning of the opening of the theatre of therapy, where the client and the therapist are in this kind of stage where it's the opening movements of the client exploring their life. There's one skill that is totally underrated, and I found so useful, and that's the skill of silence.
Oh, so much so. So much so, yes. Skill of silence, and I guess some struggle with the skill of silence going in and being a new therapist. And it's interesting, when we were working as counselling tutors together, Rory, I remember some of our level 4 learners that were out in practice who still admitted to having a bit of a struggle at times with silence, specifically if it felt uncomfortable for them. But silence is a very powerful skill and a way to allow the client to kind of process so that you can be in their frame of reference, so that it has been driven from the client at their pace as opposed to from our pace as the therapist.
Absolutely. And it's amazing. It never fails to amaze me how this very underused and sometimes underrated skill is so facilitative. Through my years, I've been a therapist for about 14 or 15 years. Through the years, I've watched clients literally answer their own questions while I sat saying nothing, or just using the affirming verbals of a heart and nodding my head to acknowledge that I'm listening, to acknowledge that I'm attending, which is a skill in itself. But as clients unpack themselves, they're not getting what they're getting from other people, which is advice, which is dismissal, which is sometimes, pull yourself together, or if I were you, I'd do this. They're in a space, an unusual environment where their story is taken seriously, there's no judgment, and they can just explore it without fear of being judged or contradicted. And I think, that is the biggest part of allowing a client, or a client allowing themselves just to see where they are in the therapy room in terms of their life.
I agree. And it was an interesting, when you were reading the topic of how do you get into a client's frame of reference and what skills or techniques might you use, I'm reminded of when Carl Rogers was writing the theory, and he spoke about the 6 necessary and sufficient conditions, and one of them is empathy. It is empathically being there with the client. And empathy is about trying to see their world as they see it. And that is frame of reference, trying to look at it as the client looks at it, as the client brings it, trying to really put yourself in their shoes. Of course, we always keep our own socks on. That's our protection, because it may be their shoes, but it is their material, not our material. But we're trying to be there and understand it as they do. And the interesting thing about that is that empathy is not a skill. Carl Rogers kind of says that they are a way of being. It's not what you do, it is how you are. And I'm reminded that during counselling study, there is great opportunity, specifically in your PD group, your personal development group, or your process group, to practice this when other people in the group are talking, as opposed to thinking what you might say next. Try to really listen empathically to what they are saying, and try to picture it, how it might be for them. Try to be fully engaged and in their frame of reference, because I guess it's like anything. It does take practice to get it right.
It does, and practice and reflection. Those 2 key things that all therapists, I think all caring therapists practice a lot. All the caring therapists I know, you're one of them, Ken, spend a lot of time, reflecting on their practice, could be in supervision, it could be with a dialogue with another therapist, just to try to explore the meanings of things. And that's so important, empathy. And you're right, it's on a lot of awarding bodies, I have to say, it's classed as a skill. But as I said to the awarding body that I taught under, if it is a skill, then how would I teach a psychopath empathy? I could teach them questioning. I could teach them, skill of silence or reflective and paraphrasing. But the empathy is a personal quality. It can be enhanced, but I guess that people need to have some form of empathy before you can enhance it. You need something to work with. I think that's what I'm saying, Ken.
I agree with that, and that's worth exploring in your counselling studies and using that time, that PD group time, to enhance your empathy, as it were. So another thing that comes up for me with about being in the client's frame of reference, getting into the client's frame of reference quicker, is to confirm our understanding of what the client is feeling and seeing so that we can understand that. And that's not necessarily asking questions unless we're asking a question to clarify our understanding, but it may be reflecting back how we understand what they're bringing to us, because this gives the client an opportunity to say, yes, you get me, that's exactly how it is. And that shows us we are well and truly within the frame of reference of the client. But similarly, it gives the client an opportunity to go, well, no, it's not really like that. And it can show us when we're slightly off being in the client's frame of reference, and we can readjust that. And there's nothing wrong as a therapist with reflecting something back how you feel that is, and the client saying, well, it's not really like that, it's like this. And then you as the client saying, wow, I now understand it's not like that at all. I was completely off there. The way it is for you is like this. And you're readjusting yourself to that client's frame of reference, seeing it as they do.
Absolutely. As Roger's taught, moment by moment experiencing, and that can shift even within the work with the client. The client may have one frame of reference that they're in, that they see the world through one way, and all of a sudden there's a shift, and all of a sudden they shift, their frame of reference shifts. So even within the therapeutic time, clients' frame of reference can move as they get more awareness. And one other thing, we're talking about books, Ken, and we talked a little bit about your books in the preamble. One of the greatest things that I think you can do if you're a level 2 or a level 3 student, or even, a level 4 higher education degree, master's degree, is to read biographies. Biographies are a fantastic way of trying to get into someone else's frame of reference in your own pace. I read a lot of biographies, and I found them absolutely fascinating because it allows you to have someone else speak about their life through the pages of a book, and you to wonder what feelings might come up or what feelings come up in you as you read it. Really, really useful. Find yourself someone who you like, who you admire, get the biography, read it, and see how much more you understand them. That's what I would say. And it's a really good exercise, and one that's not usually talked about in counselling training, I have to say. I
agree with you. I'm busy making my way through the Elon Musk book at the moment, and I'm absolutely loving it for that very, very reason. And there's one final thought on this that comes up for me, and it came from what you just shared there, Rory. And it's about looking at where you're at and how you're feeling when the client is bringing their material, when they are speaking, when they are sharing their pain, their joy, their emotion within the counselling room. And being able to look, am I thinking, oh, I can see what's wrong here, I need to be telling the client about this, or I need to be leading them there? Because then whose frame of reference is that? Whose might that be? That's well and truly yours, definitely not the client's frame of reference. So it's about being aware of what's happening in self as well as the client is bringing their material, and whether you feel that you're 100% with them. But as we started off with, this is something that develops over time. That's why to become a counsellor takes many years of being there, and many hours of skills practice that is monitored by a supervisor. It takes practice. It's not something that you can just turn on and off. And I guess by asking the question, you are aware of this, and therefore on the road to being in your client's frame of reference.
Absolutely, Ken. And also, it's a continual learning path. No one ever gets there. It's one of those things where you reflect and think about and study and learn. And I would be a bit concerned if someone said to me, a therapist said to me, well, I've got it down to a T now. I've got it down to a fine art. I don't really need to think too much about it, because it is a continual journey. There's no destination to it. As clients' journeys don't have a destination to them. You have to go where the client goes.
I love it. I think that's a great topic. And moving away from frame of reference into something that I know from your frame of reference you really enjoy, Rory, and that is the theory of counselling and psychotherapy. And not just that, you're actually speaking today about something that you enjoy as well, and that is, of course, existential counselling.
It is, yeah. I like existentialism. And for those of you who don't know what existentialism is, stay tuned, because I'm going to explain what existentialism is as a concept, as a philosophical concept. But also I'm going to be talking about two behemoths in the world of existential therapy, and that is Viktor Frankl and Rollo May. And they are two people who really have developed the existential form of counselling and developed a branch, if you like, or a parallel path to the humanistic counselling way of being, if you like. But really interesting. And Viktor Frankl's story, which I'll tell you a little bit about, is incredibly touching and just shows us how adversity can bring life and joy.
Without any further ado, it is Theory with Rory.
Counselling Theory with Rory Lees-Oakes.
The 17th century Scottish philosopher, economist and historian David Hume once observed, "The life of a man is of no greater importance to the universe than that of an oyster." It's a rather harsh observation of the human condition, but one that leads us quite nicely into the theory of existential therapy and its underpinning philosophy. So the first thing is that people who consider themselves existentialists think that the world and human life have no meaning unless they give it meaning or continue to find the meaning of their own life. To be an existentialist is to continually draw meaning from your own experience and to try and make sense of a world that can be random, unpredictable, and sometimes cruel and unfair. It also means there's no reliance on religion or philosophy to provide the answers. Now, this idea does link to a lot of other therapeutic approaches, especially person-centred therapy. Carl Rogers read a lot of the philosopher Søren Kierkegaard, and Kierkegaard is considered the granddaddy of existential philosophy. But existentialism is probably best summed up by the phrase "man's search for meaning." It was written as a title for a book published in 1946 by Viktor Frankl, who's discussing his experiences as a survivor of Auschwitz concentration camp. Frankl was a psychiatrist who was imprisoned at Auschwitz, and he gained his ideas by observing the inmates, and he noticed that those people who were most motivated and had a reason to live were those people who tended to survive longer, and some people just sadly just gave up. They just literally sat and waited to die. But it was those people who had a meaning for life that tended, not always, but sometimes, to survive the longest. And there's a quote from the book which kind of gives us a clue about how he thinks of his existential position. It says, "Live as if you were living already for the second time, and as if you had acted the first time as wrongly as you were about to act now." Now, what he's meaning by that is that we can make meaning out of our lives. We can look at our lives and try to be thoughtful of what we do and what we say as we progress through the arc of our lifetime. There are four main contributors to existential therapy. There's Viktor Frankl. He devised his own form of therapy called logotherapy, or therapy through meaning. And he drew for his ideas, some of his ideas, from the philosopher Friedrich Nietzsche, who said, "He who has a why to live can bear with most anyhow." In other words, if someone's got a real reason to exist, maybe that they've got a family or they've got goals or plans or meaning in their life, that they're the people who can survive the most difficult times in their lives. The other contributor is Rollo May. And Rollo May is best known as an existential therapist, but he did collaborate with Carl Rogers and a few other therapists, I have to say. And he believed that the struggle was between security and dependence and the delights and the pains of growth. So what he was basically saying is that sometimes we have to move away from very fixed positions, very secure positions, to areas that are maybe uncomfortable for us to grow. An example of that may be that someone's in a marriage and it's very comfortable, but it's not fulfilling to one of the partners. So that partner has to take the risk of losing what comes with the marriage to find themselves in the world. There's also a really good quote by Thomas Jefferson, which says, "Those who swap freedom for security deserve neither." In other words, if you give up your freedom to be secure, then really you're deserving of not security and not freedom. So it's an interesting perspective. And Rollo May was, in fact, one of the people, he was the first person, I think, to write the first American book on existentialism. Another contributor is James Bugentel, and he chronicles therapy as a journey into the client's subjective world. So here we're quite like person-centered therapy. We're looking at the phenomenological views of the world. But I guess that an existential therapist would probably be an existentialist. So they would be struggling with their own subjective views of the world and working with the clients as well. So I guess that gives it an extra dimension. And the final contributor is Erwin Yalom. He's a very, very famous writer. He wrote a book called Love's Executioner. And in that book, he was disarmingly honest about how he was as a therapist, about his own failings, about his own existential view of the world. And it's a really popular book in training circles. And the reason it's, I believe, so popular is because students really love to see a therapist being honest and vulnerable and a warts and all expose of how they work with clients. But Yalom's also written some really other interesting and informed books. One of them's called Staring at the Sun, and that's about people coming to terms with the end of their life or coming to terms with the fact that their existence is finite, that at some point they will cease to exist. And the themes are death, freedom, meaningless and isolation, and it's really, really comprehensive. So that is the underpinning philosophy of existential therapy. And I produced a handout called An Overview to Existential Counselling that you can download and get a little bit more detail on what existential counselling is and a little bit about the goals of the therapy.
Thank you as always, Rory. And of course, if you want to get Rory's super handout, you can get that right now. You just go to our mother website, which is counsellingtutor.com. Click on the podcasts tab. That's going to bring up a list of all the back catalogue of the podcasts. Today's episode is episode 44. Click on episode 44 and you can download Rory's handout from right there from their show notes page. Moving on now, I guess, and we're going to be speaking about the 7th stage in the 7 stages of process. How did this question come about, Rory?
Yes, well, again, another big thank you and a shout out to Andy Z in our Facebook page, who posted this really, really interesting question, and one that I've been asked many times. And he says, "Can I throw a question out?" Well, Andy, yes, you can. And he says, "Roger's 7 stages. The 7th stage, does it really exist? If so, how do we know? I really can't get my head around it." My tutor stated that in his experience, clients very, very, very rarely return to counselling once reaching the 5th or possible 6th stage. So again, how can we have a 7th stage? Well, it is an absolutely fascinating question, isn't it, Ken?
It is indeed. And that seventh stage, basically, it suggests that everything is within our awareness, within our grasp, our past, where we are at the moment, that if people have differing views to us, we're okay with that because we're firm within our own view, and we understand it as we realize that the world is as we see it, that it is not necessarily true, but it is our truth at that moment, that we are open to change that truth at any time. It's a big ask. It's a massive ask.
It is. And I think that the thing with Roger's theories, you have to remember they were an amalgam of hundreds of interviews, that's his word, with clients. He called them interviews with clients, where he developed his theory. And the theory would say that once people have got to kind of the sixth stage, you wouldn't see anybody in the sixth stage. They're taking what they've taken from the therapy and then building it into their own life. People usually leave it stage 5, but the seventh stage, yes, it's kind of like a nirvana. I did hear it described by one tutor who actually said that they were at the seventh stage of process, which I thought was highly amusing, because it was almost like they were ethereal, floating around off the ground. And I think the fact is, it's about accepting life on life's terms. That's a saying from our friends in the recovery community, but it really is that. It's about asking yourself the fundamental existential questions, I guess, Ken, of, why am I here? What's the meaning of this? And it means you've got to be onto that, I think, all the time. It's a kind of journey of understanding the meaning of your existence and your relationship with other people. And as you say, Ken, it's a flipping big ask, I think.
It is. So, I mean, the theory of the 7 stages of process is kind of what Rogers used to almost measure or assess where a client is within their journey. And he starts off with a client who any kind of pain they may be feeling in their life would be, oh, this is not my fault. This is because all the other people are doing this. If you had a job like mine, you too would feel like this. And it's kind of everything externalized. And that 7th stage being completely open with everything internalized and everything owned. And I guess if we were to take that and look to different aspects of life, if we were to look at a monk, for example, who would give up all worldly possessions in pursuit of just peace and harmony within self, and would be unfazed or unbothered, and I'm speaking hypothetically here, I'm not speaking for any monks that may be listening, that would be unfazed or unbothered by anything that life may throw at them, I guess in a way that matches my idea of what that 7th stage would be. And I look to people like Gandhi. And again, you were talking about those biographies and reading people's life stories. There's one to go and read, and you'll see how his views changed and developed. And once he was challenged, Rory, he was challenged by somebody who said, hold on, but you have just said X, Y, Z, but before, in an interview, you said ABC. And Gandhi said, yes, of course. And at the time that I said ABC, that is what I believe. But I'm open to my views changing. So if you ever want to quote me, always quote my most recent views. Interesting.
Yeah. Yes. And that is true. And I also think we can see it in snippets of people's lives where people say I'm wrong, or they change their views. Or they have very, very strong views, things like apartheid, or strong views on people's faith positions where they don't like that faith position, and all of a sudden they realize that they've changed, they can accept other people. And I think that's really important, and it's needed now, I think, in the world more than ever, where we're having to kind of work in a world where we're realizing that everybody around us is different, we're not all the same. So that 7th stage is really about acceptance of self as much as it is of other people.
An example, again, that springs to mind, just as you say that, is Nelson Mandela, a man who was imprisoned for so many years and came out and instantly forgave. Well, and that's what we saw, of course. How he internally processed that, I don't know, but there is an example of it. But it's such an interesting question. It's an interesting topic, and it is one that I challenge you to debate with your peers. Get on our Facebook group, Counselling Tutor, and discuss it. Do you know anybody within that 7th stage? You mentioned, Rory, a colleague that you once spoke to who suggested that they themselves might be at the 7th stage. And I wonder if a person was at the 7th stage, whether they would say they were at the 7th stage, or they might say, I have much to learn, because the more we learn and the more we develop, the more we realise how little we know, I guess. A paradox.
Yes. Talking of quotes, Ken, it reminds me of the famous Buddha quote attributed to him, apparently. And Buddha said, if you see me by the side of the road, shoot me or kill me, because I am not the Buddha. So basically, I think you're absolutely right. If anybody who goes on saying I'm at the 7th stage of process, maybe, I'm not saying you should shoot them. Don't shoot people. It's don't kill people. No, please don't do that. But it might be a sign that maybe their view of what the 7th stage is and what Rogers actually meant, maybe not quite the same.
I know. It's a difficult... interesting. It's not difficult. It's an interesting topic, and I guess we could debate it for many hours and not have any conclusive answer to this. And I guess it's about what it means to you. For me, the 7 stages of process is very useful. I use it all the time in kind of when I'm doing my notes and when I'm taking clients to supervision to kind of have an idea of where they may be at. And the 7 stages of process is a great way for me to reflect back to a client how they've experienced growth or change within the counselling relationship, so that they can see that and we can celebrate it together. So I find it very useful, but it's about what it is for you and how you use it, I guess.
Absolutely. And as like all theory, it is a theory. You know, it can be very different when you're sitting in front of a client, you know. So theories are good, but actual sitting in front of a client and experiencing their frame of reference, I think sometimes is a bit more important.
I like how you link that right into where we started. We started episode 44 by speaking about that frame of reference. We jumped straight into the comfort of theory with Rory, where we looked at existentialism. And of course, we discussed the 7th stage of the 7 stages of process, a theory by Carl Rogers. What an episode. I have absolutely loved it. Thank you for listening, and I hope that you will join us again for our next episode next week, episode 45.
Absolutely. And as always, stay grounded and stay safe.
Take care.
Thank you for listening to the Counselling Tutor Podcast. Find the show notes for this episode on our website at www.counsellingtutor.com.